one way it sounds like a low-hanging fruit, right? Oh, you do this, we do that, and it's easy.
Yeah.
Except it's not easy.
Carney has officially entered the pressure cooker. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Kevin O'Leary taking shots at Mark Carney on American news. We've got Danielle Smith having a meeting with him. The results of that, her also applying pressure to Carney. He's getting it from all fronts. He can't get his majority government anymore because all of the by-elections coming up, Chrystia Freeland, numerous liberals stepping down. His plan for an undemocratic majority has completely fallen apart. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we've got a Quebec battery facility accused of dumping toxic waste into the St. Lawrence Seaway, facing dozens of charges. Yeah, that's fun. We got Danielle Smith applying pressure to Mark Carney here, putting him in the pressure cooker. She had a meeting with Mark Carney yesterday. She says she tweeted about this here. Today I had a positive meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney, during which we discussed the recent events in Venezuela, how they underscore the necessity to greatly expedite the approval of 1 million barrel per day oil pipeline to Canada's Pacific coast, as well as expansion of the Trans Mountain pipeline. As outlined in my letter to the Prime Minister yesterday, Alberta's intention is to submit our application for an oil pipeline to the Northeast BC coast to the Major Projects Office by June at the latest, and I have asked for it to be approved no later than this fall. So she's putting a timeline on him. She's putting him on notice here. I've also expressed to him that any delay risks ceding market share, losing investment, and undermining Canada's competitive position in a rapidly changing global energy landscape. The federal government needs to act with urgency to seize this opportunity, safeguard long-term economic security, and secure our energy future. This is brilliant. What she's done here is put a timeline on Carney, basically using his own words essentially against him. He's the one who said he's going to move at unimaginable speeds, and this perfectly lines up with the referendum vote in Alberta. It'll be happening in October, I believe, and she's sticking this timeline on him. You better approve this pipeline, otherwise we're going to have a referendum vote immediately afterwards. She's not playing around here. She's not playing games. This is smart politics. So her letter here just basically outlines that, talks about, Venezuela. Alberta's heavy crude reserves, 167 million barrels of recoverable oil, have a value to Canadians of more than $9 trillion based on today's prices. And yeah, we can't wait around. We have to open a major pathway to get our product to market and not just be bound to the United States. That gives Donald Trump too much power. And considering what's going on in Venezuela, we have to take away some of that power and then negotiate a deal. Really, Mark Carney could have negotiated a deal already and we would be good, but he didn't do that. He didn't want to do that. Danielle Smith with a brilliant political play here. Along the same lines here, we've got Kevin O'Leary saying Carney's getting his head squeezed, which he is. Everything's falling apart for him. So they start this off talking about Greenland and the purchase of that.
The Trump administration is considering paying each resident of Greenland up to $100,000. They want to buy the island. Kevin O'Leary joining us. Kevin, you make deals. Is this a good deal for the Greenlanders? $100,000 a pop?
There's about 150,000 people in Greenland. Much of them live around a location called Kanjalusak.
So first off, there's actually 60,000. I don't know where you got that number. There's numerous resources that state that basically Greenland has a population of around 60,000. It's got 56,000 in 2023 on here.
Which was an old NATO base, one of the largest runways on Earth. That's not enough. They're not going to do the deal for 150K. I think if he got up to $1 million a person, which would be very cheap for the deposits that are there, if we're really trying to do a transaction, but to be honest with you, Stuart, I don't think this is going to happen. I really don't. I think it's a great start to a negotiation between some kind of an economic alliance, because the place does need capital to develop some of its resources. But if I were a citizen there, I'd be talking a minimum a milski, and I mean that's minimum. If I'm giving up my sovereignty, are you kidding? I mean, I might ask for $5 million. It doesn't really matter. To buy a country and get all those resources, you'd pay 50 times that amount. So let's see where this all goes.
Okay. That's basically what I was pointing out too. $1 million a piece. So there's 60,000 people, so $60 billion. America can afford that. I'm surprised they don't just come right out of the gate and say, hey, we're going to pay $1 million a piece. Just make the offer right away and see what the people do. Put it to a vote. Because I think a lot of people, especially these people here, they make on average $50K a year. They're offered $1 million. Probably most of them are going to take it because then they can retire or they don't have to work, or, they're set for life, basically.
Venezuela's oil, I believe it poses a challenge to Canada's oil export. Now, you're a Canadian. What impact does this have on trade talks between the U.S. and Ottawa?
First of all, that's a very astute question, and you're right. It's having a major impact in the Canadian political scene. What's happening to Carney, the honeymoon period is ending now. We've had a 10-year economic coma under the previous administration, the Trudeau idiot king, where no permits were granted for pipelines. And so there was no diversification of where the bitumen, which is a heavy oil product, could get to market, except down to Cushing, where it's processed. Now, we have a situation where the Venezuelan oil, which is also very heavy, is going to be coming to compete. So the Canadian price of bitumen hit new lows last week, and Carney's under pressure to permit a new pipeline that would diversify sources that could purchase this oil. Asian markets, for example, European markets. He's really getting his head squeezed now on this one. And that's probably a good thing, because at the end of the day, he was brought in after they kicked out the idiot king to move this ahead, because the Canadian GDP has collapsed and debt per capita is very high. The Venezuelan oil, however, here's my prediction. It's going into the strategic reserve. It will not be processed in Texas, where there are some heavy oil refineries. It will go straight into one of the 7 salt caves. It won't be mixed with the light oil. It'll be just put there to top up the strategic reserve. And by the way, in historic times, the last 20 years, much of that Venezuelan heavy has ended up in the strategic reserves, which could use some topping up. So that's where we're at. You got the head squeezer up north, and you got new source supply for the strategic reserve. And then what happens to Venezuela and the meeting today at the White House, that's jump ball. The most entrepreneurial oil executive there is Harold Hamm. Yeah. Rumor has it, in the PE markets, he's walking to the White House with $2 billion cash in hand to start the negotiations for asset claims in Venezuela.
That's just fascinating. One more for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there. There's this article too. It says key oil executives hesitate to commit to Trump's major infrastructure promises. Trump said the American companies would move quickly to invest in Venezuela, and turns out they are not. So he met with ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods. It says executives from 3 major oil American companies with long histories in Venezuela cautioned at the White House meeting with President Trump on Friday that any serious investments in Venezuelan oil infrastructure would require massive long-term structural changes. None of the leaders from Chevron, Exxon, or ConocoPhillips made major commitments or promises to Trump at the meetings. They're not exactly jumping for joy to rebuild what's there, because all the infrastructure is just completely old and falling apart and barely working, if it is. Here we've got an oil map of the world. You can see all the pipelines coming from Canada down here. We have the one that goes to the coast here. This is Trans Mountain. This is our one and only. All the rest go down to America. They all go through America, and to get oil over to the East Coast, we have to go through America and then back up through Ontario here. And a lot of our oil comes in from the east here, from Saudi Arabia, which is ridiculous. So looking at the infrastructure in Venezuela, most of their oil infrastructure is right on the top here. They have a couple big oil fields here, and you can see there's a couple pipelines, but most of this stuff is just decrepit. It's falling apart. It basically needs to be rebuilt. But the one advantage of this, despite it being expensive, it's actually pretty close to the United States. Send a ship straight up here to the Gulf of Mexico or America or whatever, and then get it over to one of these refineries over here in Southern America. There's a bunch of them. These are all containers here that store oil. Clicking on them, you can see 300,000 BPD crude capacity, 348,000, 557,000, which I believe is the largest one. I clicked on a bunch of these, 473,000. So most of it, the biggest reserves are down here. Donald Trump has a lot of power with this, and we need to get a pipeline going straight out of Alberta, Edmonton, over to Prince Rupert right here. We need to go right across. That's what we need to be doing. And then we should be getting one going across here, out here. Quebec doesn't like it, tough luck. And while we're at it, we can send one up here to Hudson's Bay. That way we can ship oil out the north, out the east, out the west, and out to the south to America. So Carney right now is kind of screwed, because if he doesn't do this, it doesn't look like he cares about what he ran on, which is separating ourselves from America, diversifying, being more sovereign. It takes away his entire pitch as prime minister. And Danielle Smith is putting him in the pressure cooker. You got Kevin O'Leary here with the head squeeze. I mean, and he thought he could just run his grift, getting a stolen majority, and Lori backed out from the NDP, and now he's screwed. He doesn't know what to do. I'm guessing his game plan, go over to China, since this was already planned. Xi Jinping invited him last year, and well, we've got Chrétien already over there. This is from just like yesterday. Yeah, this is from January 9th. This is Jean Chrétien over in China right now, trying to grease the wheels for Mark Carney. Carney gets there next week, and this is not the first time Jean Chrétien's been there. He's been there so many times. The Liberals are so wrapped up in China, it's just despicable. Not to mention the unbelievable ties from the Liberal Party and China. If the average Canadian knew there was all these connections, they wouldn't vote for this party. I think the average Canadian doesn't really know how bad China is. So Carney's only hope at this point is to, well, strike some sort of deal with China that will piss off Donald Trump. Then he can fearmonger Donald Trump on a kind of different topic, not just annexation. I mean, maybe he'll tap into that again, but he has to have a new angle that's super scary to scare all the older liberals to vote for him again, and all the swing voters. But it's not going to happen, because we can already see the polls shifting. The swing voters are going going back to where they came from, whether that's Conservative or NDP or Green Party. This is where we're sitting with federal polls right now. We've basically got this tied here. Nanos 38-36, Liaison 38-37, Palace Data 41-38, Ipsos 40-37, and Main Street 41-42. So, I mean, it's basically a tie here with a plus or minus margin. But there's a trump card, if I were to use the term, in this situation. And you can see projected seats for the NDP is 12. So it'd be back up to an official party. And that's without a leader. So when they get a leader, people can rally behind this person, get to know the person, and then they're going to pull more support back from the Liberals to the NDP. The Bloc are pulling back support. Carney's just going to keep losing seats here. This is the current projection right now, 156 to 142. But once the NDP get a real leader, a real leftist that can stir up all the lefty feelings and bring those people back, this is going to be bad for the Liberals. So going back to last year, the beginning of 2025, you can see the NDP on the right side of the screen there was 6%. And today they've jumped up to 10%. And that's the aggregate. I've seen them on polls higher than that, 12%. Looking at Wikipedia here, we can see the latest NDP poll here is 12%. And you can see 11.7, 11, 11.3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6%, 7%. So they've gone back up to 12%. Going back 6, 7, 8 months ago, the Bloc were like 5, even 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. And today they're back to 7, 7.6, 8, 9%. So they're gaining all their people back too.
One of the perils of Carney's trip to China will be anything that he comes back with is going to be scrutinized heavily by Donald Trump.
Talk to me a little bit about that, Carl, because that is an issue, right? I mean, you have the EV tariffs that Canada did impose in concert with the then Biden administration. And if Canada is going to move on anything because they want some relief on the canola tariffs, we've already heard from the ambassador from China to Canada saying, yeah, you remove those EV tariffs and we'll remove our canola ones. Like, this is a delicate dance for him.
Yeah, but one way it sounds like a low-hanging fruit, right? Oh, you do this, we do that, and it's easy. Yeah. Except it's not easy because the main commercial partner is south of the border. It's not China. So in as much as Prime Minister wants to diversify the trade and the commerce that we do with other countries, the reality is that there's not going to be any easy win with China. Mm-hmm. In fact, when you heard the parliamentary secretary, the win is the trip. That's the win. Yeah. That's basically what he said on your show earlier. And so I don't have much expectations. I don't think Canadians have much expectations. It could be a long process, but it's good to open that door because, because of the trade war launched by Trump, you have to talk to other partners, even if you don't like China, particularly because of the way they treat people generally and the human rights record and the environmental records. You have to talk to them. Why? Because they are one of the biggest customers on the planet.
Yeah. And so
under that logic, Carney going over there is the win. Well, are we winning a ton because Carney's flying all over the world with the big gas-guzzling jet? He's doing nothing but wasting our money. And as he's pointing out, our biggest trading partner, America, 77%. Well, China is 3.9%. So that guy there is right by saying it's not as simple as just like opening up EVs in Canada and China will open up canola again and we're all good because that pisses off Donald Trump in America. We shouldn't be trying to further piss off Donald Trump when we only do 3.9% of our trade with China. That makes no sense. And that 3.9% you can see here year by year, 2024, 23, 23, 22, 21 is more recent probably because of Justin Trudeau. We go back 10 years, back when Harper or Trudeau just got in, it was only 15 billion and now it's 21. We've also got this one out of America. Breaking U.S. Marines and sailors have seized the 5th sanctioned oil tanker performing this capture in the morning of the Caribbean. President Trump and Pete Hegseth are not screwing around here. No, they are not. That's what we're seeing here. They're capturing multiple vessels. Some of these vessels, what they do is they switch the flags that are on the vessels to try to trick the Americans, and then the Americans just keep chasing them down and eventually capture it. So they're not playing around here. They check all the vessels coming out of Venezuela because they're trying to get the oil out back to Russia or back to China. And America's made it clear that they're taking control of all of the ships or all of the oil that's coming out of Venezuela. And while we're talking about the oil sector here, we've got Eric Nuttall here dropping some serious truth bombs. I think this is on Bloomberg.
And with that oil pipeline, will this be the impetus, you think, to actually really push it through? I mean, we hear talk. You think this might be it?
God knows. God knows. Like we've been listening to talk. I still don't think the Carney government, the Liberal government, is a massive proponent of the Canadian oil sector. I just don't think they understand just how hugely important the oil and gas sector is to the Canadian economy. I think they're still stuck in the fairy tales of net zero by 2050 at a time when the rest of the world is pivoting away from all of this nonsense. And we're one of the few countries that is impairing our industry when, do you think the United States is using that to filter their strategy towards energy. And so we need to get out of our own way. We need to recognize that no public company is going to step up to build another pipeline to the West. It will at first have to be a taxpayer initiative, and yet it's in the national interest of all Canadians to get out of under the thumb of the United States and Donald Trump and increase our export capacity and, very, very importantly, diversify our customer base. It is it's the very definition of being in the national best interest.
Mark Carney ran on pushing back against Donald Trump and diversifying our exports. And yet, what's the first thing he's not doing is opening up our ability to sell our oil to other countries. You can't make this stuff up. They just said anything to get elected. They're not following through. Canadians need to wake up. At some point, they have to wake up that they're just getting duped here.
And now you mentioned earlier you were cautious for the start of the year, but the second half of the year, that's what you were looking at. What's the reasons for that?
Yeah, so we think there is an imbalance right now in the global oil market. We do see global inventories growing for the next quarter to two. What we think is that non-OPEC supply will be peaking the next couple of months with final projects coming on stream, with a view of demand growth a little stronger than consensus this year. We think that a lot of the excess will be able to be mopped up by the market. And the market will, at some point in the first half of this year, start to look beyond the near term and recognize that we're in a world where there's lack of sufficient investment, there's lack of sufficient exploration and exploration successes. Non-OPEC production is peaking this year. OPEC has very limited spare capacity, and yet demand is going to grow for decades to come. And so
oil production will continue for decades to come because it's going to be the central supplier of energy on planet Earth for decades to come until something else comes along. And Carney and the Liberals know this. They're just trying to cash in on net zero. I mean, I don't even think most of the Liberals even realize what Carney's doing, but Carney's inner circle does.
Towards a oil supply crisis where there is a structural imbalance between demand growth and supply growth. U.S. shale growth very clearly has and is coming to an end. And so we're very bullish on the outlook for oil going forward. We think that the oil price will have to rally to incentivize a long lead, high risk, very expensive exploration and oil developments. That is not an oil price in the 50s. It is not an oil price in the 60s. And honestly, it's likely not an oil price in the 70s. That's the future coming. And I think that will start to be expressed in the valuations of oil stocks.
Also sharing this chart here, BCers themselves support a pipeline, and we see British Columbia right here. Support is these blue colors. 56% of British Columbians support a pipeline. Let's just have a referendum, vote on it. Carney government, the Liberal government, blinded by greed, the fortunes expected from the carbon market they created for themselves.